We're all drowning in data, right? And in this flood of information, it's incredibly easy to look at the numbers and, well, get the story completely wrong. Today, we're going to put on our detective hats. We're going to learn how to spot the hidden clues in data to find out what's really going on. And our first case is ready to go.
So let's start with a simple one, a question you might have even thought about while sitting at a restaurant. Do smokers actually tip less than non-smokers? I mean, it seems like a pretty straightforward question. You just collect some data and see what it says, right?
And if you do that, if you just look at the raw numbers, the answer seems to be a clear yes. On average, smokers leave smaller tips. So case closed? Well, not so fast. Any good detective knows the first clue can often be a misdirection. We have to ask, is that really the whole story? And this brings us to what is maybe the single most important idea in all of data analysis, the difference between correlation and causation. See, correlation just means two things tend to happen together. They're related somehow. But causation, that's different. That means one thing is directly making the other thing happen. So the real question is, does being a smoker cause lower tips, or are they just correlated? To really crack this case, we can't just go with our gut feeling. We need a method. We need the right set of tools to help us untangle all these messy relationships and find what's really going on. So let's open up our Causal Detectives Toolkit.
First up in the toolkit is the treatment. In any investigation, you can think of this as our main suspect. It's the potential cause that we're putting under the microscope. In our tipping mystery, the treatment is pretty simple. It's being a smoker.
Next, we've got the outcome. This is the effect we're measuring. You could even call it the scene of the crime. For us, the outcome is the tip amount. So our whole investigation is about whether the treatment actually affects this outcome. And now, for the most important tool of all, learning to spot the confounder. This is the hidden villain in almost every data mystery. A confounder is some other factor lurking in the background that influences both our suspect and the outcome. It creates a fake connection and illusion that can lead us completely down the wrong path. Honestly, this is the #1 reason simple data analysis gets it totally wrong.
So with our tools laid out, we can follow a nice, clear 4-step process. First, you state your question. Second, you identify any potential confounders. Third, and this is key, you have to block the influence of those confounders. We call these the backdoor paths that create those false connections. And finally, once those paths are blocked, you can isolate and measure the true effect.
Okay, that's enough theory. It's time to actually put our toolkit into action. Let's go back to our first case, the tipping mystery.
All right, here's our case file. The treatment is being a smoker. The outcome is the tip amount. But look at our potential confounders. The total bill, the size of the party, even the day of the week. You gotta wonder, right? What if smokers just happen to go out in smaller groups, which leads to smaller bills, and smaller bills just naturally get smaller tips? That could be it, couldn't it?
And this is the absolute heart of our investigation. Is smoking the real reason for the smaller tip? Or is it just an illusion created by these other factors, these confounders we just talked about? The way we block those backdoor paths is with something called statistical control. And you can think of it like this. We're creating a fair comparison. We're essentially telling our data, hey, only compare a smoker and a non-smoker who had the same total bill with the same number of people at their table on the same day. By leveling that playing field, we can finally see the effect of smoking all by itself.
And the verdict is in. After we control for all those confounders, the data still shows a negative effect. So what this means is that even when we account for things like the bill size, being a smoker is still associated with leaving a slightly smaller tip. Now, why that is, well, that's a whole other mystery, but we've definitely isolated a more robust, a more real connection here.
Okay, so we've solved a pretty low-stakes mystery about how people behave in restaurants. But this toolkit, it's not just for fun. It can be used to answer questions that have, life or death consequences. So let's take everything we've just learned and apply it to a case with much higher stakes.
So welcome to our second case, the crash investigation. We all know that drinking and driving is dangerous. But as causal detectives, our job is to go beyond just knowing something and actually establish a clear causal link. Does alcohol involvement truly cause an increase in car crashes, even after we account for all the other factors?
Let's build the case file. Our treatment here is the percentage of crashes in a state that involved alcohol. The outcome is the total number of crashes. And our confounders? Well, there are a bunch. Things like the rate of speeding, how many drivers are distracted, and even which state we're looking at, since every state has different roads, different laws, and just a different driving culture. And this is exactly why we can't just compare a state with high alcohol involvement to one with low involvement. The first state might also have way higher speed limits or more distracted drivers. To find the real truth, we absolutely have to statistically control for these confounders to isolate the direct impact of alcohol. And when we do that, the result is crystal clear. And frankly, it's not surprising. The causal effect is strongly positive. Higher alcohol involvement directly leads to a higher number of total crashes, even after we've already accounted for other risky behaviors like speeding. And this right here, this shows you the real power of thinking causally. We've moved beyond a simple observation, these two things seem to happen together, to establishing a direct, measurable causal link. This is the kind of solid evidence that allows policymakers to create interventions that they know will save lives. So, after our 2 investigations, what's the verdict? What have we really learned from thinking like causal detectives? Okay, here are the key takeaways. First, you absolutely have to hunt for confounders. Ignoring them is probably the fastest way to get the wrong answer. Second, the little details of how you prepare your data really matter. And third, and this is so important, this kind of analysis helps explain why things happen, not just predict that they will. And finally, this whole toolkit is how we turn a simple spreadsheet into a powerful, actionable insight. We are swimming in an absolute ocean of data every single day. But as we've seen, just having the data isn't enough. The real power, the real skill, is knowing how to question it, how to look for those hidden culprits, and how to uncover the real story hiding underneath it all. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What common belief, what obvious connection that you see all the time might actually be the results of a hidden confounder? Once you start looking for them, you'll start seeing them everywhere. Thanks for watching.